Hi, this is Sergeant Beast Larson. I want to talk about handling death, processing death mentally and emotionally and spiritually. As a police officer and a correction officer and former military, I've seen a lot of death. Infants, 30 days. I've seen 2 babies, 30-day shots that have passed away, and that's like a 1 in 12 million. I've seen 2 of them. All the way up to the elderly murder-suicide plot, where one of them has cancer or health issues and they're about to die, and they've agreed. The one shoots the other, the spouse. They say they're packed. They've got things written out. Usually they leave a will, the driver's license, stuff like that. But the one will shoot the other and then shoot herself. Murder-suicide. As a police officer, we tend to look at it as an investigation, as a report, as details. We're looking for description of things. If they're suspect, we spend more time trying to determine who did it, drawing a sketch, taking pictures, getting a log, logging who comes to your crime scene and all. And it's a process. That's the word I want to use. Death becomes a process as a police officer. At the end of the day, usually after this, if you're on the scene of a death, you're there for hours. You do get hungry. It's human nature. You need to go eat. And a lot of times after a death scene, a car accident where an arm and a head was cut off, I went to, and when I was done, the first thing I did was eat because I was there for hours. A floater, a woman floating in the river for 3 months. By the time I cleared that scene, and I'll never forget, my brother was in town visiting, and it was actually on Valentine's Day. And first thing I did was go get a pizza. That's what police officers do. They get desensitized to death. And I get through my whole career. The last night I worked 3rd shift, I had a couple years left. About 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm supposed to get off at 7. I get a car, single vehicle accident in a tree. And the first thing in my mind was, it's my last night on 3rd shift. It's going to be a DOA. Somebody's going to be dead in this car accident. I wasn't thinking, oh no, I hope they're okay and the ambulance is going. And I wasn't thinking about the life and life saving. I was thinking of, because it's my last day, that's just how the odds go. And I go and get there, and here's a young lady, senior in high school. She was in a car by herself, red Pontiac Sunfire, hit the tree, a huge tree, and she died instantly. So I notified my supervisor, the chaplain was notified, he went with me. We went to make notification. When you go knocking on a door at 6:30 in the morning, sun's coming up, people just waking up, and they see a policeman with a blank look on their face, and the chaplain, that has identification, says Reverend so-and-so, police chaplain. We come to find out this was their only child. She was a valedictorian. It was the morning of graduation ceremony. She had been out with some friends at a party, not supposed to have alcohol and drugs and things. She was drunk, drove home drunk, and died, their only child, on graduation day. And when the couple came to the door and they saw us, the woman, first thing she did was scream and reach out and start to hit on me like this. I had to grab her to stop. The chaplain introduced himself right away and said, "Ma'am, let me talk to you. Let me pray." As police officers, we go through this. But what did I do? And I learned my mistakes accidentally many years later. After I worked police, I was in private security, and then I got working down in a prison, Hayes State Prison in Georgia. And I was told by the leader, the head MS-13 there, he said, "Sarge, I know you were a police officer." And I said, I've worked around the government, different things. He said, "No, you were police." I said, "What makes you think that?" And he said, "The way you look at people, the way your eyes are direct, like I'm leaning forward to see this, the way you talk and communicate with people and handle yourself." He said, "Plus you've got fighting skills. I've seen this." He's telling me how he saw this on the outside. He knows. And I said, "Well, I can't say yes or no." And he said, "It's all right." He said, "Let me tell you something." He said, "You've seen a lot of things in your life, but you've not processed mentally and emotionally death." And I said, "Explain that." Because I've been to training, I've been to 40-hour training on how to debrief and handle officers that have been involved in serious or deadly officer-involved shooting kind of situation. And he said, I've killed many people. He said, but every day before I go to bed, I have a drink, I'm smoking, whatever I do, I take my time, I cry and I grieve. He said, I grieve every day. Whatever I need to grieve, and I have acceptance so that when I go to sleep and wake up tomorrow, I've already let it go. He said, you didn't do that. You've made all of these deaths and investigation and problem solving to try and figure it out. He said, that's a big difference. And we discussed this a little bit further, and I thought about it, and there's a lot of truth to that. I'll tell you why. I got out when I left the prison, moved to another location, was working for a little bit at an airport, and I ran into a guy. I saw West Point Academy sticker on the back of his car. So I said, thank you for your service. He looked at me and he said, thank you for your service. I said, how do you know that I served? And he said, I see it in you. We had a short discussion, and I said, can I ask you a question? He said, sure, I got plenty of time. And I said, this is my background, this is what I've been through, and I was told this. I said, I've been thinking about this for a year now since this conversation. What do you think about what this specific person told me? And he said, I 100% agree. He said, you're not troubled. You don't have post-traumatic stress in a bad way. He said, but you've not accepted. He said, we tell and teach the young military, you have to that day get guidance through the Bible, through the church, through the family, through whatever. Come to terms with it and accept that a life or lives were lost and handle that. And it was very ironic because he's a head instructor at West Point. And he told me the exact same thing as the MS-13 leader who's a serial killer on how to process death. What does that tell you about in our world and how ends meet? The military doesn't normally run into MS-13. They're two different ways, but they both had the same idea. They both did the same thing to handle death. He said, your brain is a filing cabinet. You have all these things back in here. He said, you need to open the drawer. Take everything, all the deaths that you can think about, get them in front of your mind, and for several days in a row, you need to start praying about each death one at a time. And I talked to him, I told him, my dad was a preacher, I grew up in the church, my religious belief. He said, then you need to pray about each one, turn them over to God, and be done with them. And let me tell you how I figured out that I compartmentalize death instead of processing it daily and individually. About a year and a half after I retired, maybe 2 years, on my wife's side of the family, her uncle was sick, and we would make dinner, and every night after dinner I would take him a plate just down the road, and did that for several months. Got a different job, relocated. 3 or 4 months later, we were out of state. We get a call that he's been in the hospital. We knew that he'd had some problems, some surgery, a lot of infection, didn't recover. They told us that he's basically on life support. They're waiting for us to get there, come as soon as we can. Well, I got in the call. We got the family, made a phone call to work, said I got to go and we got down there and got to spend a little bit of time with him and watch him. And this is going to be hard for me to talk about. Looked him in the eye. We all hugged him. We all told him we loved him. Watched him unplug the machine. Watched him pass. Now, I've done CPR 16 times that they did not live, and twice I saved them. 16 times people died in my hands during CPR. Other people have died in my hands where CPR wasn't in progress, through mass injury and trauma. I've held people that's died in my arms. I've been close to death that much. And we watched him pass. Back in the 90s, the Covington police officer Parton in foot pursuit fell off the bridge running from Covington to Cincinnati. They jumped from one part to the other and he fell in the Ohio River. I helped with that search for almost 3 months before his body was found. I went to that funeral. I went to the funeral of many of my coworkers, family members, parents, whatever, to show support. Go to the funeral, all these policemen stand there just like cold, like robots. No emotion. When Uncle Andy died, all the deaths that I've seen, that emotion came out all at once. And he was a great man. Loved to hear his stories. But I had hundreds of deaths come out in emotion that day. And ever since that day, when there's conversation and talk about death close to me like this, I get emotional. So I know that I'm okay. I do show emotion. I have that inside of me. It does make me cry. I'm a human being. But for the longest time in my life, and then nobody close to me, that close to me, had died from 17 years old until about 45 years old, between my grandpa passing and Uncle Andy. Nobody close to me. All the death was just an investigation. It was a process. It was through support or whatever. I had no emotion. Folks, this can happen to you if you don't learn to handle daily. Accept this. Accept and have emotion. Please do not shut this emotion out of your life. Allow this to happen. Allow this to be you. Be human. Keep it real. You'll hear this a lot of times. Keep it real. That's how I knew I wasn't in trouble inside, but I hadn't fixed it either. Well, I've prayed about all those deaths. And I can show emotion, and I can be a human being. At the prison, we had some inmates die from stabbings, some from committing suicide, from hanging. And we had one particular that really affected two 18-year-olds on the scene that had never seen that. And I spent several days, several hours talking with them to help them get through this, to understand what the person did and why they died, the decisions they made. And how the officers were still officers and good people. And it's appropriate, and I was proud of them, that they had emotion. And they hadn't lost it at 18 or 19 years old. I've been through this. I've talked about this a lot. I've wrote an expert opinion on 5 police shootings on our police department before I retired. I've taught defensive tactics and baton over 20 years. I've been very close to a lot of violence and death, but I am still human because I figured out how to be. So this video, hope you like it, hope you share it. We're almost at 13 minutes. I wanted to be kind of brief. Learn how to handle this. Learn how to process this. Don't let it ruin your life. Whether you're on the viewing side, the investigative side, or you're the officer involved shooting side, you're involved in this. Don't let it hurt you. Do that for me. Hit the like, hit the share. Share, please, with everybody to help. Hit the subscribe button. See you next time.